And that's what I want to get into here next is sort of the midterm view from this assassination attempt. We saw the RNC was already going in this direction before this happened, right? Because the platform came out, it stripped out all of the gun policy promises. Now that's policy promises. There is a single line that talks about protecting the right to keep and bear arms alongside, a couple other rights from the Bill of Rights. But we saw Trump come out and give his acceptance speech. It's the longest in history, at least in, I guess, modern history, where people count such things. I don't think they were, counting they didn't necessarily have stopwatches 100 years ago to time the acceptance speeches. But the televised era, it was the longest one, and there wasn't a single line in there about the Second Amendment or gun policy or anything to that regard. And and additionally, the RNC didn't feature any pro-gun speakers. No one from the NRA spoke, unlike in 2016 when Chris Cox was there. They didn't have any of the other gun rights groups. They didn't have any gun control groups speak either. So not to say that there's necessarily a big policy switcheroo. They're not bringing up new gun restrictions they want to do, but they've just kind of gone silent on the issue of the Second Amendment. And, what it makes you kind of wonder where things might go in a second Trump term, because, Trump has a mixed record on this stuff is what I would say. Mm-hmm. Compared to Joe Biden, yeah, it's probably an easy choice for gun voters, right? Even with any concern that might arise from this stuff. But at the same time, he's advocated for an assault weapons ban when he was a private citizen. He wrote a book in 2000 that did that. He reportedly considered backing one after the El Paso shooting, but decided not to. That was in private, as the New York Times reporting. He never publicly stated support for it. Then, of course, after Parkland, he had the whole roundtable where he infamously said, take the guns first, due process second. He implemented the bump stock ban, which was just tossed by the Supreme Court as unlawful. These are, obviously you can go the other side and say he appointed the Supreme Court justices that tossed that ban, and that gave the country Bruin. And he's done a couple of other policy things like repealing an Obama era Social Security regulation that affected the gun rights of people on Social Security. He made gun businesses essential during the pandemic. But I don't know. I just wonder where you see this all going with how the RNC went. It doesn't. Do you see any change from Trump from the assassination attempt in particular, or do you think that the way the RNC went was just how it was going to go anyway?
I think the RNC was going to go how it was going to go. And again, this is not happening in a vacuum, right? It wasn't just that gun rights were taken out of the RNC platform. Right. The major complaints that I've seen are actually from pro-life activists who say, right, okay, well, you're still talking about abortion, but you're setting some limits that we don't like, right? And that's
they've changed policy
right?
there.
Exactly. This was sort of, hey, let's just not talk about it. So it's not that the platform said, okay, well, you know what, we support a national right to carry reciprocity in 2016. Now we think it should be left up to the states. Let's just let the states figure that out, right? That's not what they said. This is what they said about abortion, essentially.
Yes.
So I think that, I don't take it personally as a gun owner. I think this is a political strategy. And we'll see if this political strategy plays off. But I think the strategy, and it's been, I think it's open now, is that the Trump campaign believes that this is a moment where they can, if not run the table, a la Reagan in 84, at least expand the map, right? And so we've heard Chris LaCivita talk about New Jersey being in play, or at least competitive. Virginia, which appears to very much be the case right now, that Virginia is in play. And so, they are specifically targeting, I think this again came from Chris LaCivita, who said, we're specifically targeting these groups here. So we are going after suburban moms. We're going after black men between the ages of 18 and 34. suburban women, Stephen, as you all know, I mean, those are some of the strongest supporters demographically for gun control. So if you are trying to appeal to suburban moms, it makes sense from a political standpoint to say, okay, let's lay off the talk about protecting AR-15s and the Second Amendment, even if that's still what we believe, and let's talk to these voters about issues that they do care about. Am I concerned about what we're going to see in a second Trump administration? Not as concerned as I would be about what a second Biden term would be, or a first term for Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom.
Sure.
But, this is something that I think that in general, I've been thinking a lot about this. And I don't think that we as Second Amendment supporters can afford to just be an auxiliary of one political party.
Yeah.
Because when that happens, you get taken for granted, right? It's just assumed, well, you're going to vote for us because where else are you going to go? And I think that it does become easy to sort of put our issues on the back burner. Mm-hmm. But two, we have two major political parties in this country. And we have seen over the past few years a growing number of Democrats, certainly independent voters, who are exercising their Second Amendment rights. There are some in gun world who appear to not be happy about that development. They don't really like, the idea of outreach to the LGBT community or things of that nature. I'm a big tent guy when it comes to the Second Amendment. And I believe that the Second Amendment exists for we the people. So we as Second Amendment advocates should be fighting to have supporters across the political spectrum. And I think this is, a reminder not just that Republicans may take gun owners for granted, but I think it's also an opportunity to start looking deep. And we're going to have to, you really got to, peer into the bushes and look in the shadows, but we've got to start building up pro-gun Democrats too. Because if we put all of our eggs in one political party's basket, that's when our Second Amendment rights actually become more insecure, right? And so I think a world in which you have blue dog Democrats, or at least Democrats who can say, yeah, I'm not interested in trying to ban AR-15s. Let's go after violent criminals. Let's do violence, community gun violence prevention, things that are not, law enforcement in nature. It's not about putting more laws on the books. I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine if Democrats said, you know what, I care about gun violence, but I don't believe we need to be targeting legal gun owners to try to reduce it. That would be a step forward for me. And so I think that for me over the next 4 years, that's one of the ways that one of the areas that I want to sort of take a look at and then, figure out how do we get this to be a more of a nonpartisan right that, people in both political parties feel comfortable supporting.
Yeah, no. And I think you've got the analysis right there on why this has happened at the RNC, why Trump didn't talk about it, why the RNC cut the promises out of its platform. I mean, as much as your average swing state voter is not reading the party platforms, right? But the signaling of that, I think, is entirely intended to try and remove a potentially controversial issue from their talking points, from their point of view, right? I don't think it's so Donald Trump got shot and then he had a change of heart on the politics of guns. I don't think that's what happened. I think this was a pre-planned thing. And the reason I think it ought to be concerning for gun rights advocates, as you just mentioned there, is it is the Republican Party essentially taking them entirely for granted, not promising them anything at all, at least not outside of sort of maybe hushed whispers or when they're in a room where they don't think it's going to get a lot of attention to make promises like that. And it does seem to be a shift because Trump himself has gone and spoken to the NRA twice this year already and made a series of gun policy promises to them. Although I will note that at the last speech to the NRA, he did come out and say that gun owners don't vote. And I don't know, it seems like they've really taken that concept to heart, and they're just they don't necessarily want to go out and make them angry by shifting policy, but they don't, they certainly don't seem to feel the need to, entice them into supporting the Trump ticket.